Thank you everyone for joining us today for this conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Richard Rice, Associate Professor of Spanish in the Department of Modern Languages, and I'm the Associate Faculty Dean of Engagement and Inclusion. Did I get that right, Tom? Okay. I'm also the founder of the Borders and Migrations Initiative, the Latinx Speakers Series, and the longest running of my initiatives, the LGBTQIA+ Speakers Series, which I founded back in 2011, the year I started at Canisius. I want to thank the co-sponsors, including Modern Languages, Honors, Political Science and International Relations, Arts Canisius, Department of Communications and Digital Media Arts, Campus Ministry, the library who's hosting us today, Sociology, the Center for Online Learning and Innovation, and ULLC, the Urban Leadership Learning Community. The film, as a reminder, is available here in the library via Amazon Prime, video on demand, and for those of you without such streaming access here or abroad, there are codes available for alternative viewing platforms if you email me. I also want to encourage you to support the film via the Firebird website where you can purchase the film. The Memoir is this lovely book with historical pictures in it of Sergey, as well as pictures from the film. And other related material, and to support ongoing efforts to advance LGBTQIA+ rights globally. It is worth noting that the English translation of Sergey Fetisov's memoir, Firebird, the Story of Roman, upon which the film is based, is now available. I just got it the other day. I'm especially thrilled today to welcome to Canisius the co-writer and lead actor, Tom Pryor, and writer-director Peter Ribane of the Estonian film, Firebird. Before we begin our conversation, I want to thank Tom and Peter for gifting us with such a gorgeous film of love and perseverance despite all odds. The film is richly colored, embedded in the time period, of the love story, dramatically taught and emotionally real. I'm grateful for this film and for the opportunity to visually revisit Estonia. I sadly missed the opportunity to see the film and speak with Tom and Peter at Baltic Pride last summer, so I'm delighted to be able to have the opportunity to do so now. For those of you who read the memoir and watched the film, I wish you all, in the words of Sergey, the opportunity to find repose in the arms of love and hope, something particularly needed today. Please join me in welcoming Tom Pryor and Peter Ribane. So I'm going to start out with some questions for the two of them, and then open it up for all of you. Peter and Tom, you ready?
Yep. Hi.
So I know that Sergey had indicated that he wanted the film to be a love story and not a political story. And I think the film works as a love story, but I wonder how it's, I feel though that given the time we are currently living through, that it's hard not to see this film in political context. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the reception of the film, its censorship in Russia, and how the film is sort of in discourse with the current political situation in Central and Eastern Europe.
Shall I start?
Yeah, go for it.
I think you're absolutely correct that when we met Sergey in Moscow, we made several trips before he sadly passed away. One of his main really requests to us was to make a love story, not to start make a political film. And I think that's what we set out to do. But the film, of course, touches on a very political issue, which is the equal rights of LGBT families in Russia today. And as of December, end of December, actually, screening this film or selling the book in Russia is illegal. Literally, you'll face a prison term for doing this event in Russia at the moment because it will be considered homosexual propaganda. And that's kind of scary, sad, and also concerning how over the last 10 years, Russia has really gone back in time. Sergey published his memoir in the early 90s when there was this brief moment of liberalization, and and really since then it's become in a way worse than what it used to be even under the Soviet rule.
I read, I think in an interview with Tom, that there have been 92 articles published about the film in Russia, lambasting it for insulting the Russian military.
Yeah. I mean, we were screened at the Moscow International Film Festival, which we honestly were very surprised about. Somebody even dared to program us. We were like, okay, maybe there's a possibility of progression really beginning to happen here. And the light at the end of this rather dark tunnel in terms of like the sort of human rights situation going on there. But the first screening went ahead in Moscow. Actually, during the pandemic, it was an in-person screening. And pretty much there were, I think it was like 82 or 83 press articles written about the film, like 82 of them like inherently negative because it's effectively illegal to write positive things about this film. And then we had protesters outside the cinema holding up banners saying "Stop homosexual propaganda," and a letter written to the state prosecution office saying that the film should be removed from the festival. And so we weren't actually kicked out, but our film was effectively silenced there at the festival. And so they cancelled all the tickets and all the invites and VIPs that were coming to the second screening. And the film effectively played to an empty auditorium. And I think sort of that sort of was a pretty strong message to silence the film. And they were not happy about the fact that we touched on the military, and then of course like the escalation of all of that really kind of hit it head in the breaking out of the Ukraine war, and the fact that we'd actually cast a Ukrainian to play Roman as well is that it just escalates and escalates and escalates in so many different ways. And the strategy which we had to actually bring in when we knew that the film was about to come out in April and May in England and the US was actually really to get ahead of a potential crisis of the film being misinterpreted as a Russian story and a Russian funded story. So we really had to like kind of jump on board with that and actually just really let everybody know actually quite how the film had been received in Russia. And really it's about actually sharing and shedding a light on what has happened there and what is happening there. And there were certain fall downs in that. Like we did lose a theatrical release in one particular country, a big country, because they thought it was too much of a risk to show like a Russian film. And that was kind of sad, but so it's been far more political than we ever expected to. And like I said, and as you sort of have researched Sergey, very well in that he had said, please just make the film about love and not politics.
Well, I think it's sometimes hard to separate those two things. What is the situation with Oleg right now? Because I had read that earlier he was running a cafe in Kyiv waiting to join, and I think maybe he has joined in the war effort. Do you know what he's up to right now?
As much as I know, he's making clothes for the soldiers and running the cafe in Kiev. But Tom, maybe you know anything newer.
No, I think that's pretty much like all we know.
And he got a special permission to join us for the premieres last spring, and also we did a trip together to New York in June. But that was the last time that we saw him at the end of June.
Okay. Having read the memoir, there's a lot of differences between the memoir and the film, and I wonder if you can talk about how you made those changes from the memoir to the film to still keep the authenticity, I guess, emotional authenticity, even if some of the details are no longer the same from to.
Tom, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you also for sending actually the pre-question around that. It was actually interesting to highlight, the particular characters or aspects that we decided to change. It was pretty fundamental for me when coming to the script and after Peter had written the sort of first draft, that it was really needing contextualizing. When you read the original story, there is definitely a initial sense of almost disbelief, or like, how on earth could this have happened during this time? And yeah, we worked pretty hard to basically bring in the sort of sociological and political context of the time. The reason why, for example, we didn't end up having the character of like the old man, for example, from the book, was that I think most people would actually think it's actually unbelievable. And it's like there was a lot of times, there's moments in the book where like they ride in the taxi and the guy gives them a free ride because he's so like in awe of Roman and Sergey's love. I think if we put that in the film as well, people would be like, this wasn't possible, like this isn't happening, this is not Soviet Russia, like get a grip, like where have you been? So yeah, there was quite a lot of contextualizing which we had to do. I think probably some of the biggest changes actually we did as well was to very much alter the character of Louisa, because she, in my opinion, and I don't want to speak for Peter, but we kind of collaborated really in terms of our perspective of how we wanted to show Louisa was actually that her tragedy is as significant as the boys' is. And so we felt it was really important to give her a fair perspective there as well. Maybe Peter, you can list the rest of the changes that we made.
Well, I think the emotional story, the love story, is really what inspired me to actually start developing this book into a script. And when we did it together with Tom, it was really tough to cut out a lot of stuff, like all of the period at the home village with the mother. We actually had a lot of scenes there and an amazing kind of character, and it just felt like we are dragging, like that the story, the film would have been probably 3 hours long at the end. And we had to make some like very critical decisions of compressing time and cutting out periods, because obviously in a book you can explain a lot, but if you want the film to be watchable under 2 hours, then that was probably the toughest choice. We cut out, we didn't really cut out characters, but we added characters like Zverev. Zverev is based on a real life character. Actually, there was a KGB major by the name of Zverev at the Palano Air Force Base where we shot all of the airfield scenes, and that was again to create this more clear and present danger in the story, which I think was obvious to anyone who read this memoir in the early 90s. They would have understood the threat, and so my kind of feeling is that Sergey didn't really spend time describing the tough threat side, because that was for him like part of life.
I think I sort of missed the character of Pilot, who was in the memoir, but not in the film, the dog.
Yeah, I think that's another one of those decisions which we had to make. Be like, oh yeah, like not only is this happy couple like running through the Russian military together, but they also have a dog. It was just like, this is going to be a little bit too much of a stretch of the imagination. Like, and that's the thing that's kind of incredible, is that people will always be receiving your story at the time which you're releasing it.
I'm kind of a little bit regret that we didn't end the whole film also at the cemetery, like in the book. I think there's a very poetic moment, but again, like you can't have 3 endings, and it felt like we would drag on the ending. But there are some poetic moments which wish we would have actually included in the film.
Well, people just have to read the memoir after watching the film. Yeah. Speaking of which, is the memoir going to be translated into other languages?
Good question. Depends how much interest for it is in English language. We've gotten quite a lot of requests on social media from Spanish-speaking countries and also from Brazil for Portuguese. Yeah, let's see. We thought to actually also publish it in Russia again, but they managed to change the laws just in time that now it's illegal to sell the book in Russia.
I mean, maybe the Russian exile community in Eastern Europe. I mean, I know that we've got several people online watching us from Mexico and Argentina, so I'm sure there's an audience for the Spanish edition. I also noted that the memoir is written in a very sort of romantic literary style, by which I mean a lot of nature as sort of a stand-in for emotional language. And I wondered how you've decided to film nature. I mean, there's a lot of the forests and the bogs and the lakes, and I just wondered what filming the natural aspects.
I think that was one of the really amazing bits of the book, which also spoke to me. And I think the best example actually is the scene in the blueberry forest, where Sergey is kind of looking at the trees and this moment between them in nature. But I think that's my kind of feeling, is that looking back, I should have probably included more of it while filming, like while directing it. So I think my honest opinion.
Yeah, I think there's something really beautiful in the natural sensitivity, like in the book, and as like so much can be done in the way that you decide to shoot the film once it's been written, and then there's other moments where like we maybe like over edited out actually in the script stage, like these kind of like more like natural moments, like where Sergey like may like see like a bird or like there's and like have like this kind of like moment like between him and like nature that I think that we actually both like agree it would have been nice to actually include some of that, but then there's also like you can run the risk of ending up like trying to make a film for too many people. So I think that overall the decisions were made like how they were, and I think that actually that's why the book is actually really a really nice like addition now to the film. Actually, it gives a very different perspective and kind of like enriches actually the experience of the film. It's quite unusual to have, you know, a book released after the film, even though it's obviously written before. But it from what actually we've been hearing of feedback actually from people like who have just started reading the book in English, is that it's really enriched their experience of seeing the film, which is cool rather than disappointing.
Yeah, no, I think they function really interestingly in tandem with each other. Yeah, I also wondered about Firebird itself, the ballet, the Stravinsky ballet. I wonder if you can talk about the incorporation of that. I know that the Estonian ballet company did not have that in their repertoire, and so they like did, I think, 3 scenes from the ballet for the film. But I wonder if you can maybe talk a little bit about the meaning of the Firebird ballet in the terms of the film.
It's I think it has a strong resonance with Sergey's personal journey of really finding himself and kind of rising through the ashes. And also the music really was, I think, the decisive factor. When we interviewed Sergey, he actually said that their most favorite piece to watch was the Yevgeny Onegin opera. But we kind of listened and felt that it didn't really resonate with the film language. And so we decided finally that we would go with the Firebird. So yeah, I'd say the kind of allegory, the reference of Sergey's own journey in the film and the music were the two key factors. And as you pointed out, the head choreographer of the Estonian National Ballet literally developed the costumes, sets, and trained with the dancers to put on the 3 scenes for the filming. So it was a pretty cool collaboration.
I do have more questions, but I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask questions. Spencer, yes, you might have to come closer to the speaker box.
Great. Thank you both for spending some time with us here today. So here at Canisius College, we are a Jesuit school, a Jesuit institution. And so what that means is we try to get students to reflect on some of the bigger questions in life, thinking about who they are in the world, what is their place in it, getting them to pause and reflect on what they are experiencing and how it's affecting them. So I was wondering if you two would be willing to share how this project affected you both personally. How did you grow? What did you learn from this? How did it affect you? Were you inspired in any way personally through the filming and production of this?
Do you want to start, Peter?
Sure. Well, since it's first feature, then first of all, it was a huge challenge to actually make it happen. I think for me, personally, directing in all kinds of circumstances and making this story in a believable fashion was quite a huge challenge, to the point of I think total overexhaustion and let's say health-wise to the borderline of sleeping like 4 or 5 hours a day for half a year, which kind of meant that I was pretty burned out by the time that we started editing, and in a way the whole lovely pandemic time gave us extra time to reflect and think about what else to change and what else to cut out of it. But the biggest challenge of all was actually starting to do it. I remember kind of having hesitations about actually going from producing to directing, and I think making that decision and actually starting to do and starting to learn was the critical point.
Yeah, I think for me, the journey like through this film, like I was approached originally to play the character of Sergey, and then I kind of ended up becoming one of the co-writers sort of by accident, when Peter graciously took some feedback on, we were shooting a teaser, we're shooting 3 scenes to a sort of high industry standard to sort of show a proof of concept and help raise the rest of the financing for the film. And yeah, I started just giving some feedback and suggestions on how I thought some of the dialogues could be changed, and then some of the scenes could be changed. And then we ended up rewriting together for about 2.5 years. It was a kind of initiation, like for me, in terms of writing a full length feature film, because I'd written things before, but not anything quite to sort of this scale or size. And so it was a process really of self-discovery as a writer, and then as a producer as well, and really kind of going through those motions of trying to convince people to give you money to make a film, and the sort of social conflicts that can bring up. And then for me, probably the hardest point actually of the production was about three months or so before we were about to start shooting. And I had this really big sort of crisis actually in confidence and belief in myself. And I'd been on this journey for quite a long time at this point, like about 3 years into development, and just really couldn't actually find the belief to continue and play the character. And even at one point was just like, maybe we need to find somebody else to actually play Sergey, because it kind of almost felt like it was so such a pressure like for me now to play it, because we'd gone to Russia in this time and met Sergey, and we'd even gone to his funeral when he passed away. And I just felt this sort of immense weight and responsibility on me, but it really actually was a sort of dark night of the soul, and made me have to dig real deep. And that's basically when I began to start meditating and began to sort of like really like switch up like my health and like look after myself, and really begin to like work with changing like limiting beliefs that I had about myself. And I worked with a number of very, very talented people in terms of physical training and in terms of sort of helping me change my mindset. And it was like a really, really powerful experience. One of the biggest things I was actually concerned about on the production was my energy levels and getting sick. Because like if I'm sick as like the lead actor from the production, like the production doesn't work. And so like you can have all the sets ready and you can have everybody there and the crew and everything else. But like if you're like your lead characters or your lead actors basically are not there or not able to operate, then it kind of very quickly collapses like a stack of cards. But yeah, so I'm like super grateful for the challenge that actually that was there. And I worked very hard in terms of just like, yeah, removing limiting beliefs and alchemizing, and ended up like really like working these like crazy long days. And like we would do a 12-hour shooting day, for example, which was actually then 13 hours because it doesn't include lunch. And that also doesn't include driving to and from the set, which could sometimes be up to an hour. And then on top of that, then doing like my physical training plus like my morning routines of having to kind of get into the sort of character space as well. And we're talking about a very little amount of sleep, and you still got to look like, you know, like bags under your eyes and everything else. So yeah, there was a lot of like overcoming actually like through this project. And you know, people asked me how would I measure like success on this film, and I said in some ways I already had it, and that was really like going on that journey and proving to myself more than anybody else like that actually that I could do that.
Speaking of getting sick, how was it filming in the Baltic Sea?
Well, I didn't get sick from it. I have to say, like I was very grateful to stay, you know, where I was and sort of like with the work I'd been putting in and the sort of belief around that, just going like, you know, programming my belief system, being like, no, I can do this. I can spend like 11 hours in the cold Baltic Sea on our first ever shooting day and shoot basically a sex scene with somebody I haven't known for a very long amount of time in the water. And like, but it was astonishing actually, like how actually like shooting in that cold water actually really brought our whole team together very close on our first shooting day. And you know, had the team of costume girls sort of pouring hot water down my pants like just to keep me warm, and they built us like a sauna tent on the beach, which is actually an amazingly good thing that actually would have happened because we were shooting in Estonia. In England, people would have been like, get over it, it's cold and wet, and like everybody would have been ill and miserable for a week. But yeah, we were taken good care of.
Other questions from the audience? Come on, don't be shy. Yes. If you speak up.
Maybe I should move.
Or you can move closer. By the way, thanks to my assistant, my SEEP student.
Everybody? Okay, I do have a question in terms of like, how do you think the public has changed their opinion, hopefully for the better, on the two of you guys and such? Like, the content of the film is so, like, especially in Russia, it's just not accepted by a lot of people. So how do you think like you have grown that community of people who are able to say, okay, this is not what we don't want to stand for hate, we don't want to stand for discrimination, like not only as people but also as like actors and directors and things like that, if that makes sense. I'm not quite sure if I worded that correctly.
You need clarification, or do you feel? Well, I think you're asking about how the film has maybe changed people's minds,
like
socially.
Socially, but also like could they face any sort of hate for their roles and like in the production.
Okay.
Like not only as like people, but also as like actors moving forward in their careers and in the production realm of things.
Okay, so I guess it's a two-part question. Is whether the film has had a positive impact on sort of cultural perceptions of homosexuality, but also whether the production itself or you individually have experienced any negative consequences for portraying, or positive, yeah. Yeah.
I'd say like in terms of how the film has affected people it's been really amazing actually to get so many incredible messages of gratitude in terms of like representation on screen and actually to such a large scale. It was really amazing actually to show this film in several different places in America, like in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and I went to like Atlanta and like a few other cities, like when we were doing the San Diego, to doing the kind of film festival tour, and actually people were so grateful to see representation in such a scale actually. And it's, you know, a lot of the time LGBTQIA plus stories have been sort of set in quite like, can be like kind of smaller stories, or like in a kind of smaller context, whereas like this, I think like really appealed to people beyond, or almost like to another category, because it is like that much with like the kind of military and the sort of the awe of which history has shown the Soviet Union to be. And I think that's been really positive, and it's been really amazing actually to have like messages from people saying, you know, as a result of your film, I would treat people that I know who are members of the LGBTQIA plus community like respect, not really knowing actually how complicated it can be actually to basically experience love. Like a heterosexual couple, you know, may not actually fully even ever think about or understand. And that's what was actually so amazing, that when we've shown it to a great deal of people who are outside of the community, that they are really profoundly moved by the story, by the message, and also find it actually also surprisingly relatable. Somebody said to me that one of the hardest parts of the film to watch was actually when Louisa says that she's going to be married to Roman, because this guy had basically said that exactly the same thing had happened to him, but it was like the other way around. And so he was in love with her, and then she was getting married to his best friend. And so there's lots of different kind of points of relatability, and that's been really amazing. I really hope we have created some kind of social change. There's a lot of people that have written to me who are actually in countries where it's still not acceptable, not allowed, or it's illegal to be in love with somebody of the same sex. and they've been really moved by it, and I've had some quite personal stories written to me, which has been really really endearing, actually, to have that trust actually in somebody watching the film. And in terms of personal sort of outcomes, there has been a kind of interesting combination of things. Like, so our production and like our sort of heads of department and myself and Oleg and Peter and a few other members of our cast and crew have been sort of like attacked by Russian bots like several times. Like, even when I do Instagram lives, even still today, there is quite often quite a lot of homophobic content, which is just sort of like slurs and stuff, which are kind of like thrown in all Russian. And that's just a case of like having to unfortunately remove it as and when it goes. But ever so occasionally we do get these kind of this kind of like hate mail. We did actually receive death threats actually when we were first beginning to release the film at some of the film festivals, and people becoming aware of the film. So that hasn't necessarily been easy. And yeah, like, I think also there's a reality in the film business now where sexuality is being like much more included suddenly, which is really incredible. And like the level of diversity through the film business has suddenly got very, very strong. But like, there is also probably the question mark still about kind of going, can an actor, be cast to play straight roles after gay roles and gay roles after straight roles, and do you have gay actors playing straight roles, and straight roles can't be played by gay actors, and and like the whole rhetoric goes on. But I believe that the industry is moving into a much more inclusive place than it certainly was 5 years ago. So I think that that's a very positive aspect. But yeah, there's probably an amount of my career I might have given up as a result of playing this. But then at the same time, if the industry does catch up and change, then hopefully that sort of wave will actually end up sort of falling back on itself.
Peter, did you want to respond to?
I think Tom said everything, not much to add.
Other questions from the audience? Mark.
So as someone interested in teaching Cold War history, I couldn't help but notice your strong commitment to authenticity in the film, striking MiG-21s, a lot of Zhigulis, UAZs, uniform details down to the last detail. Can you speak to a commitment to authenticity material and period authenticity when arguably that may not be necessary to tell a love story, or even budget action films, they're more likely to compromise under those circumstances?
Absolutely. That's, having come from a documentary background also, for me, critically important. And I think for the whole team, when we set out, we made a very clear intention that we tell the story historically accurately. Because often you look at films and you're like, wow, like that's like nothing like that time period or that place. And we wanted to, I think we wanted to kind of really be as precise, because in a way, yes, for the love story, it's not that critical, but it creates the world. And I think if the world around the characters is believable, the small detail, then also the story becomes more believable, that the emotional connection becomes stronger. So we actually shot, I think, at about 46 locations in Estonia. We actually searched for buildings that still were intact, where the Russian occupying military used to be at. So the barrack scenes are actual former barracks, which were demolished the next year. The airfield is an actual ex-Soviet airfield, and there was one hangar that was still intact with the bomb blast tours. The MiG is an actual MiG from that time period. Obviously, it didn't fly, but it could be rolled around, towed behind a truck, and then painted out. There was definitely a lot of detail going into the costumes. Our biggest scenes were about 120 extras, and we actually sewed costumes for everyone because there was nothing available from that time period. We could get something from much earlier or from the 80s, but again, the details changed. And I think the probably the best example was we were filming at Sompa, where we set up the Air Force Base, and literally the barracks outdoor scene is an actual apartment building in this old town near the Russian border. And at one point we are filming and a man comes out of the doorway, and we had to stop, and the AD went to usher him off the set, but he was coming with a photo album, and he had been a major in the Soviet Air Force. And we actually looked at his photos and looked at Zverev in his costumes, and it was literally 100% correct. Like you could see every little detail, which was kind of cool. So for, I think for the team, it was important, and it was also fun.
Any other questions from our audience or online too? If you're online, you can submit questions. How has the film been received specifically in Estonia?
Actually, really well. I was a little bit wondering if there will be any, let's say, negative comments, and didn't see one, literally. Even this lovely, we have, I think, like all countries around the world, we have about 18% in the parliament is this conservative people's, I can't even know what's their English language translation party, and they are anti everything, racist, homophobic, so on. Even they didn't comment. So it was a good testimony of how Estonia has really developed in the last 30 years, and grown totally into a different universe compared to where Russia is today. I mean, we have equal partnership law since 2013, and there's debate about equal marriage, whereas it's really changed. And I think it was also important for the audience here to remind people that this kind of love stories happened even during the Soviet occupation. And I had quite a few people, mostly actually older ladies, come up to me, like in a shopping center, in a cafe, and be like, I don't know you, but I just want to say and thanks for the film, which was cool. Because we had a totally wide theatrical release, pretty much all the multiplexes and cinemas in the country.
The character, I want to go back to the character of Roman, because I feel like in the memoir, he's full of a lot more self-loathing than in the film, where he comes off as much more confident. I wonder, because I saw in an interview, I think, where you had interviewed other LGBTQIA+ people who, from that time where Sergey had also served. And I wondered if the portrayal of Roman evolved in conversation with others who had lived through those time periods.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually, really. I mean, I can only really comment on how we wrote him versus how Oleg played him and how Peter directed him. But yeah, he definitely had a kind of a sort of more of a lightness in the film. That's for sure. we actually had a long process of trying to find somebody who kind of fit that bill. And Oleg was kind of the closest that we got, because there were no pictures either as well. There was no kind of point of reference. It was really like down to like the imagination in terms of like how we wanted to end up casting him. We kind of knew that he has had this sort of Cossack type features, which Sergey had described to us like in person. But yeah, in terms of like how he was played, actually, I mean, maybe Peter, you want to like comment a bit more about like overall like the sort of the direction of the performance.
Yeah, I think that's I think foremost the question to Oleg really of his interpretation of the character. So I think he made a very clear choice about how to play Roman, and I think his kind of basic assumption was the fighter pilot aspect. And I in a way, I think it's kind of makes the ending maybe a bit more dramatic, less predictable. If he was like very self-loathing and at times depressive during the film, it might actually be less of kind of believability in a way for me. Yeah, but actually I haven't thought about it. It kind of just developed and happened this way. But it's more, I think, personal interpretations rather than, let's say, research or a conscious decision.
Yeah, I'd say that also, like, just to kind of speak from the point of view of like Sergey, I'd say that I made a decision on how to play him based on actually meeting Sergey in real life. And that really informed actually how I wanted to play him. And also partly it had been a very strong instinct of mine, because I didn't, even when we were writing, I didn't want him to make him into this this like character who experiences a lot of shame, which is a very strong theme, you know, in LGBTQA plus stories. And there was actually a part of me which wanted to sort of, as an artist, like take it away from that, and actually just show different possibilities, like and different versions of doing this, because Sergey in real life was such a kind of bright, sunny character, despite like the chaos and the environment which he lived in. And so that's like, for me, principally why I decided to play him in this more I'd say like proactive energy, as opposed to a slightly more depressive kind of, not like sulky energy, but like you know, Peter and I like kind of laugh that like initially Sergey ended up being quite a bit more like sulky, and I was just like, let's just like shift it a little bit more over here and a little bit more over here, just to kind of, because I think that we've seen that a lot. And I feel like it's important, like the nature of the story, and to show what love can really can really be like is essentially the power which we can do with making a film like this.
Last opportunity for questions. If not, I have one last question for you all, and I wonder what projects you are working on now, or if you have other projects in the pipeline that you want to share.
I am writing a new story. It's not really in the stage where I can tell you what it's about, but it's gonna be taking some of my favorite genres, which is spy and espionage, and then basically hybriding it with some LGBTQA plus characters, and setting it probably about 55 years in the future. That's basically all I can give you for now.
Well, when it's done, perhaps you'll come back to Canisius.
Yeah, for sure.
My current key project is still Firebird, wrapping up things now that the book is released, and we also put it on Amazon and etc. So it's really just making sure that the whole production gets wrapped up, and we have a couple of stories as well which been thinking and developing, but also almost like superstitious about talking about them before something happens. Yeah, actually a couple of like really interesting stories. Interesting, actually, neither of them are LGBT themed at all. I think my challenge probably is to now just be quiet and feel out which story speaks next.
Well, I want to thank you, Tom and Peter, for joining us today, and thank you all for participating today. And I look forward to more work from both of you. And if you have not seen the movie, watch it. Buy the book; it's really good. It's a completely different experience. Go online to Firebird, and you know, they got T-shirts. I'm still waiting for my T-shirt. And yeah, and support your friends and family in the community. And with that, there's food in the back from Ukrainian, Polish. Sorry, we don't have a large Estonian population here. I did the best I could, getting geographically proximate. And thank you. So thank you all, and a round of applause.
Thank you for organizing the screening and for inviting us to share about this story and about the film.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you for your eyes.
Stop.